What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to episode number 11 of the Ask Me Anything series, which happens to be the first episode of the 2021 Stanley Cup Playoffs. Now, originally, the plan was after I posted the last episode, that would be the last one until next season, but I've been itching to just casually talk some playoffs with you guys, so I figured this would be the best way to do that. Before we begin, as always, huge shout out and thank you so much to everybody who took the time out of their day to go ahead and leave a comment on the post. If you guys would like a chance to be featured in the next interactive video, whenever that is, just keep an eye out on the community tab. If you guys enjoy the Ask Me Anything episodes or just the interactive videos in general, then be sure to leave this video a like. That's the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And now let's begin. The first comment comes from Notorious Nick, who says, should the Pens do anything about their goaltending? Jarry is actual Swiss cheese. That was definitely not a good showing from Tristan Jarry in their first round series against the Islanders. I would say that he is the sole reason they lost. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but to me, the Penguins outplayed the Islanders in most games. Jarry just couldn't give them a save when they needed one. I mean, he quite literally just handed the game away, and I believe it was Game 5 overtime, where he came out to play the puck and just passed it right out to Josh Bailey, who ended up scoring the game winner. I do think goaltending is something the Penguins have to address in the offseason. Now, I don't think they're just going to go out and get rid of Tristan Jarry. I don't think they should either. I think the most likely scenario here, and what I think they should probably do, is look to go out and get a guy who can kind of come in and be a 1A option, and Tristan Jarry can be like a 1B option, just to kind of give the Pens more depth at the position and give them another guy that they can throw into the net when Tristan Jarry isn't playing well. Because after game 1 of the series, Tristan Jarry really didn't look good, but the Penguins weren't just going to throw Casey DeSmith into the net for game 2, right? Like, how much better would he be than Jarry? Some possible cheap candidates I think the Penguins could look to go after in the offseason. James Reimer is one. He looked really good this season in the small sample size that he played. Antti Ranta out of Arizona is another. I almost said out of Phoenix there for a second. I don't know why. I haven't done that in a long time. This next comment comes from Leafs Nation Forever, who asks, what are your thoughts on the Wild and Preds fighting hard against their top tier opponents? If you guys watched my bracket challenge video that I uploaded before the playoffs, you would know that I picked Vegas to beat Minnesota, but I said it would take them 6 games. I figured Minnesota would put up a pretty good fight, so the fact it's going 7, I'm not all that surprised by it. Vegas has really struggled to score so far, and I think a big reason for that is because of how well Cam Talbot is playing. He's got 2 shutouts in the series. He's up close to like a 940 save percentage or something crazy, but in general, the Golden Knights just aren't really finishing well, and I think you can attribute a lot of that to the fact that Max Pacioretty isn't playing, who is arguably the Vegas Golden Knights' best finisher. Game 7 is going to be a lot of fun tonight, and I honestly don't know which way it's going to go. Like, I could very well see Minnesota pulling this out. Now, in terms of the Preds putting up a good fight against the Canes, that really surprised me. I predicted the Canes to win that series in 4 games. It was the only sweep I predicted in the entire playoffs. I also said in my prediction video that I didn't give Nashville much of a chance at all, so they've definitely proved me wrong. They put up a really good fight against the division winner. Game 6 was last night in Nashville. Carolina did end up closing it out in overtime thanks to a Sebastian Aho OT winner, but for a while it looked like we could potentially be heading towards Game 7. I think Nashville had a 3-1 lead in last night's game. In the end, the better team won, but it was definitely a lot harder for them than I expected it to be. This next comment comes from Thomas H, who says, is Jack Campbell the guy moving on? He's been stellar in the playoffs, and if this hasn't convinced you, nothing will. I mean, before the playoffs even started, I knew that Jack Campbell was going to be the guy moving forward. There were some people that really believed Frederik Andersen would start game 1 of the playoffs, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. I stand by what I said, a couple of weeks before the playoffs started. I think Frederik Andersen has played his last game as a Maple Leaf. Jack Campbell is the Toronto Maple Leafs starting goaltender. He's under contract through next season, so I think opening night next season he's going to be this team's starter. Moving along now, this next comment comes from 37 Will Dog, who says, what round 1 series has surprised you the most in terms of playing out differently than you thought? I think my answer to this is going to be the same answer a lot of people would have to this question. The Edmonton Oilers getting swept by the Winnipeg Jets was the biggest surprise to me. I predicted the Oilers to win that series in 5 games, and the second Kyle Connors scored the triple overtime winner to send the Oilers home, I started getting comments on my bracket challenge video just roasting me for my prediction. Now, I will say that this series was a little bit closer than you might think. Like, if you didn't watch any of the games and you just saw that the Jets swept the Oilers, you would probably think they dominated them in most games, but this definitely wasn't a sweep like the one we saw in the Colorado-St. Louis series. In that series, Colorado kind of just wiped the floor with St. Louis in every game, but in the Jets-Oilers series, that wasn't the case. 3 out of the 4 games went to overtime. 1 shot, 1 bounce could have changed things dramatically, and honestly, the Oilers didn't play all that bad. They controlled the play at 5-on-5 in most games. They just couldn't get it done, and when they blew that 4-1 lead and then lost to the Jets in overtime, and I believe that was game 3, I kind of knew the series was over then. There's like no coming back from that. It's definitely going to be an interesting offseason for the Oilers. They have a lot of decisions to make. I would say the two biggest ones are deciding whether they're going to try and bring back unrestricted free agents Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Adam Larson. Next up, we have a comment from Adam Bentelli, and this kind of ties in to what we were just talking about, the Edmonton Oilers. Do you think McDavid will ever want out of Edmonton? He's shown no indication of a desire to leave soon, but in the future, do you see that as a possibility? Like you said, he has shown no desire that he wants to leave soon. He was even asked about this in an interview after they were swept about the outside noise of him potentially wanting out, and McDavid said no, he likes the core group that they have, he wants to see this thing through. However, in the future, I definitely could see it as a possibility if this team doesn't see a lot of improvement, if they don't see much postseason success at all. Like, for an example, what if the Oilers miss the playoffs next season, and then the year after that they lose in the first round of the playoffs? That is when I think it could start to become a real possibility that we see like a McDavid trade request or something crazy like that. Next up, this comment comes from FlamesFan1, who says, could you see the Nazem Kadri suspension hurting and possibly eliminating the Avs in the second round? I mean, it's definitely not going to help. Kadri is this team's second line center. He's a very good player. We saw what he did with them in last year's postseason. He was fantastic, but based off of everything we've seen so far from the Avalanche in the postseason in that 4 games against the St. Louis Blues, I think they're probably going to be fine. This is a team with a lot of depth. I don't think not having Nazem Kadri in a series will be the tipping point and the deciding factor on if they win or lose that series, if that makes any sense. This next comment comes from Ozzy Plays, who says, who's got the best playoff beard so far? And also says, love the vids, I appreciate that. I'm not really sure if this counts as a playoff beard because this player has had this beard for like the entire season, but I mean, come on, you just can't really compete with this. Next up, this comment comes from Dara Sampson, who says, do you think Gretzky announcing he was leaving was ironic timing or planned? Also, what are your thoughts on him leaving the organization? Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Wayne Gretzky had some type of role in upper management of the Edmonton Oilers. He was some advisor or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the role was, but after the Oilers were swept, it came out that Gretzky was leaving the organization, and I just think the timing was kind of ironic. I just think it was bad timing. Like, if the Oilers won the Stanley Cup, Wayne Gretzky was still going to leave, because we learned shortly after him leaving the organization that he signed a deal with TNT to become an analyst for the upcoming season, which I'm pretty pumped about. We're going to be seeing a lot of Wayne Gretzky on screen, breaking down plays, talking about the game. I think that's really exciting. What I'm really interested to see is who they end up pairing Gretzky with in this role, because I know he's not going to do it by himself. I think they're trying to go for something like what the NBA has, where on their panel for TNT, it's Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny the Jet Smith, and Ernie. So depending on who they decide to pair with Gretzky, I think that could be a lot of fun. Let me know down below in the comment section, who do you think are some maybe former players or personalities in the game that you think TNT should hire for their panel. Next up, we have a comment from Andrew Masuki. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name, Andrew, but the question is, which team has looked the most complete offense, defense, depth, goaltending so far? This is kind of a boring answer, but it's hard not to choose the Colorado Avalanche here. Everything was clicking for them in their 4 games against the Blues. They got great goaltending. The top end talent was putting up points. They were getting depth scoring. They were getting points from the blue line. You name it, they got it. Next up, this comment comes from Dave Collins, who says, can the Wild actually win the series against the Vegas Golden Knights? We kind of touched on this earlier in the video, but yes, I believe that they actually can, especially with the way Cam Talbot is playing and how good the Minnesota Wild's team defense has been, limiting Vegas' scoring chances, and obviously Vegas, when they do get them, they're having trouble finishing them. I mean, it's Game 7. It's win or go home. Anything can happen, so again, yes, I do think Minnesota has a real shot here. From the Amazing Gamer 6736, what has been the most fun series to watch so far? This is a tough one. I really enjoyed Boston, Washington, but it didn't go as long as I would have hoped. Tampa, Florida, I think that was really exciting. I think that lived up to the hype. It was just extremely chaotic. It had a little bit of everything, so I think I'm probably leaning towards Tampa, Florida for that question, but I will give an honorable mention to the Penguins versus the Islanders series. I really enjoyed watching that, which I didn't really expect to, because the Islanders, you know, they kind of play that boring style of hockey that I personally don't like to watch all that much, but it is effective. However, that series was definitely not boring at all. We had a lot of goals, we had overtimes, we had comebacks, and just watching the Islanders play in front of that crazy crowd at Nassau Coliseum was really cool to see, so I liked that series a lot. And now, finishing out the video, the final question comes from Curtis Gamey, who says, do you think Kadri's suspension was appropriate, and do you think anything will change through his appeal? This is something a lot of people have been discussing pretty much ever since it happened. and I do think the suspension was, rather appropriate. It was one of the worst hits that we've seen in a very long time. He was coming across the body, open ice, and he hit all head. It was a really awful hit. I figured it was going to be a pretty long suspension, so in my opinion, 8 games was completely fair. Now, as far as will anything change after his appeal, I honestly have no idea. It's hard to guess when it comes to something like this. You're really just throwing a shot in the dark. Maybe they decide to take like a game or 2 off or something like that. Again, I have no idea. So that is going to wrap up episode 11 of the Ask Me Anything series, the first episode of the 2021 playoffs. Like I said at the start of the video, my original plan was to take a break from this series until next season started, but I really enjoyed this, so I might make a couple of more throughout the postseason. If that's something you guys want to see, then be sure to let me know down below in the comment section, and leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. And lastly, and most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all in the next video.